So today's call, every time we think about what's happening with Tesla stock, I think one of the biggest movers is partnerships. We've seen it happen with the Hertz that happened a year and a bit ago now, December of 2021, I guess. And then we saw it with the supercharger partnerships with Ford. And every time there's new supercharger partnerships, it gets the base kind of excited. We've now got the partnerships with Beep announcing they're going to do $100 million of supercharger purchases in the US. And then just recently we had, what is it now, HEG Group saying the same thing. So one of the things we've all talked about is what kind of partnerships is coming down the pike here. It could be more superchargers, of course. It could be FSD. Some people think that might be happening soon. And then others like Larry Goldberg has been saying that it's going to be more than just software. It could actually include things like the drivetrain or batteries and more. And as these legacy auto OEMs are getting much more desperate, it's very likely that this could happen. So what I wanted to do is, bring everybody together and talk about what is the most likely. What do you think is the next thing up in line, and how likely is it to happen, and when would it happen? So let's start with you, Alexandra.
Well, I don't have a crystal ball yet, but I'm absolutely certain it will come. And why am I so certain? Because more and more analysts that get privileged information are actually using it in their reports. It sort of becomes now suddenly something people talk about. They don't want to quantify it other than the Jonas report from September where he started quantifying it, but it just appears all the time again. And so Larry, I don't know whether he's in the public and wants to speak up. If not, I want to sum up what his stance is. He thinks Tesla becomes not only a tier 1 provider to other car makers, but a tier 0.5, meaning the real privileged partner for key parts for which there's not going to be a competitor. There are usually 6 tiers of car suppliers. We heard during COVID how Volkswagen thanked the 40,000 tier suppliers they had. So, OEMs had become typically an assembler rather than a car constructor. And Larry's theory, and I think he's right, he's spot on that one, is that Tesla will provide the most essential parts to the cars. Could be obviously FSD, could be infotainment, could be the battery train. So when will it happen? I have no idea. And I just wanted to add, I think you saw that as well, that in China, the partnership, they're going to adopt the Tesla China chargers now as well.
We got Omar here. Omar, we're talking about partnerships beyond the superchargers and what partnerships are you expecting to come next? Are you one that believes that FSD might be next, even before FSD is out? Do you think that it could be software? Could it be hardware, batteries, and even something more exotic than that? What's your expectation for the next partnership to land?
Yeah, I mean, I think FSD has a huge licensing opportunity as active safety, as driver assist, and also as fully autonomous. I think the compute piece, there's definitely some use cases for other businesses, even that have nothing to do with autonomy, to use Dojo and the chips they've developed, their inference compute, even their battery cells, their charging infrastructure. If the whole world is electrifying, Tesla has some of the best technology to enable that. And I think the supercharging deal is really quite a bit deeper than people realize. It's really hardware, software, and services. So there's other companies, of course, that can sell you a charger, but not many that can sell you a charger, a payments network where users can just plug it into their car and you can automatically charge their card on file, software where it can actually route users to the correct charger to make sure that it's not too full when they arrive there. Software that can provide real-time status updates of how many stalls are full, how many stalls are empty, and how many stalls are out of order. So the user knows when they get there whether they're going to be waiting or whether there's going to be a stall available for them. And now, with the latest technology, they can actually see how many cars are routing there. Not even there yet, but how many other people are headed there. So, okay, there's 6 stalls left, there's 4 people headed there. Okay, I should be good, but barely. I better hurry, right? And then they can even do predictive charger availability, where they can just guess based on the data they have. So all of these things, they matter a lot for the user experience, for the user being happy, for them not to be frustrated. And if you don't have these things, users are just going to be disappointed in your charging experience. They're going to say, why doesn't it have these things? Why wasn't it on the map of my car? Why couldn't I see the number of stations free? They're going to come to expect these things. And as all of the world's transportation moves to electric, it's looking like Tesla is going to be playing a central role in that. Contrary to the narrative that, oh, the competition's coming and they're just going to blow Tesla away, Tesla's going to be nothing, we're actually seeing that the competition does not have a marketable product without a lot of help from Tesla in licensing a lot of those core technologies to actually enable a user experience that is acceptable.
Yeah, that's a great overview, but can I nail you down? Which kind of automaker, if you don't want to name one, and when would it happen, and what do you think it is? I mean, you can say, yes, the next supercharger, that's a 98% chance, but give me something else beyond that.
Well, obviously, I don't know what the next partnership is. I think there's going to be a lot of partnerships. I think you're going to see partnerships from oil companies, gas stations, charging networks. I think Tesla's quickly going to become the number one fast charger in the world in terms of fast charger hardware. They'll quickly blow ChargePoint and every other Chinese company out of the water because they're the world leader in reliability, in low cost, in profitability. If you buy charging hardware from Tesla and use their software and services, you can have EV chargers that aren't just a publicity stunt, they're actually a real business. And I think on the FSD side, I think pretty much every automaker is really going to have to license it because I'm not seeing anything else that is a pure AI solution where it doesn't require any overhead, it doesn't require any pre-mapping. A lot of people can't tell the difference between stuff. And, people even share these screenshots in China. But look closely, when you see them, you notice that the markings are fixed. They're not being populated dynamically with vision. They're actually coming from the map. So the core AI ability is not actually what it's driving on. So I think Tesla has something really distinctive here. They have something low cost, and pretty much everybody's going to have to license it either for active safety or beyond. I think insurance, autonomy, all of these things can run to anybody who's using their vision stack. So it's really getting to the point where it's like you have this software that can prevent a crash. It's almost irresponsible to put your family in anything that doesn't have this. And so I think there's going to be really a massive licensing business. I see the EU and the US markets actually increasingly mandating this technology over time. And just like with corporate average fuel economy, standards, and other regulations that sort of mandate people to modernize, I think people will be turning to Tesla to actually provide those solutions because when you have active safety and do it poorly, it just really annoys users.
I've got a debate with Jeff. Before I do that, Xander, what did you post up there?
Oh, it's the cyber spoon, and I like the Easter egg of what they put on the box, which of course Elon didn't know about, which I find hysterical. But I think we're going to see this in the future. You're going to see powered by Tesla, and that's from the drivetrain and the batteries, and I think that's also coming.
Okay, so panel members, help us kind of settle this debate that Jeff and I have been having. So I think that the next partnership is going to be software, generic software that run the car. You heard Elon ask Ford's Jim Farley at the last space many months ago that they can power their software. Jeff is pretty bullish on FSD, and I just can't see FSD being a partnership happening now, despite the comment that we're in early discussions with a large OEM for FSD. FSD version 12 is not yet published. And, the three US based OEMs who would most likely be the next partner for FSD because it's just so much more catered here in the US. They're kind of, they just settled their union situation. I don't think they're in a state at this point to do this. Jeff, do you want to comment on why you think FSD is the next thing that's going to happen soon?
Yeah. I mean, a couple of things. One is the partnerships and licensing come from, at their core, a make versus buy decision that companies have to make. And what companies do is they try to figure out organically, is it something that they can build over time to meet the business opportunity? And if they can't, they go and they seek out partnership solutions with other companies. And, it's called make versus buy. It's called other things in other companies. But I've done, several of these analyses. I've executed many of them. And one of the things I'm noticing with Tesla is that when you start breaking down the components of the business, they are starting to, they're basically at top one or two box in terms of ranking and like everything that they're doing. So if you look at the drivetrain, if you look at, as Omar was just talking about FSD, there really isn't anything even close. And then you look at the charging network and you look at the performance, the cost, the capability of it. And so when you're top one or two box and everything, meaning like from a ranking perspective, if you're do a scorecard or a report card on it in terms of like the ranking of the solution, when people decide that they can't make it themselves and they're going to go and partner with you and they're going to figure out if they can, come up with a business opportunity. That's what this EG, this gas station thing in England, came about. You'll see more of those partnerships. In terms of FSD, the code doesn't have to be, right now, Tesla could be having conversations probably with one or more OEMs, of like, look, this is where we're at. This is what we're building. This is how many miles we're gaining per day. And, OEMs have to go and, sit in the boardroom together and kind of look in the mirror and say like, well, what are we building? What are we doing? And do we have a chance to catch them? Do we have a chance to compete? And if they can't answer those questions, then they've got to get on the partnership bandwagon. So nobody thought that GM or Ford would be, having, press conferences or Twitter spaces or whatever with Elon celebrating their partnership for, for charging solutions. And you'll see more of those again in the future because these companies they either have to partner and survive or they've got to reconstruct like what their companies are and rebuild and come back as something different. And this is something I was touching upon a little bit earlier today is so all these companies are taking a step back and these are, three of the biggest auto manufacturers in the world. Ford, GM, VW, they've announced they're stepping back their EV efforts. Well, what are they going to come back as in what form? If they think that they're going to re-enter in the same, like, we're an auto company and, EVs are, just another propulsion system and we'll take the old propulsion system out and put the new one in and, we'll be fine. I mean, they've learned that lesson that as they got their car to market, they were literally being lapped by Tesla in cost structure, performance, and in even volume and supply. So now think about like the world that they're going to be re-entering. Let's say they re-enter in 2025. They basically said they're taking a powder in 2024. They re-enter in 2025. Tesla's going to be nearing the completion of their 5 million unit per year vehicle. They already have a vehicle that's going to get to 2 million per year, which is the Model Y. And now they're going to have a 5 million unit per year vehicle. So they're going to have to come back and they're going to have to figure out, okay, Tesla's going to have this supply chain where they literally go out and they order one model, they order one bill of material basically, and leverage it across 5 million units. They'll still be building probably a couple million Model Y. So they're going to have these two products that they're going to be basically leading the entire auto industry in supply once they're both, once the Model 2 is, or the lower cost model is ramped. And how do I bring this full circle? They're going to have to, they can't come back with this strategy of like 20 or 30 models and trying to get, EV ramped again and getting a participation trophy. It isn't going to work because the cost structure that Tesla will have on a 5 million unit model and on a 2 million unit model with their autonomy, the whole game will be completely different by the time they re-enter. So they're going to be forced into partnerships. So I've often said that the FSD piece, it's going to take a couple of years to integrate into a vehicle. So I expect that one to happen, imminently. And I expect more charging partnerships.
What do you guys take that on the second quarter, Elon said that they're in early discussions with a large OEM, but nothing was said in the Q3. Any thoughts on that? Anybody in the panel want to answer that?
I mean, they're probably still in conversation with them, or it was cut off. Maybe, they couldn't come to terms on a deal. Who knows? Maybe they have to come back to the table again at some point. We don't know. But it would have been a great question if an analyst wasn't, was like aware of like what's going on and could have asked that question. It would have been a great question. That would have been one of the questions I would have asked. 'Cause I think if it's core, to the, valuing this company beyond automobiles are their partnerships and their technology.
Is there any truth in the thinking that if you partner with an FSD, you do require hardware to be installed in your cars? But now that they've delayed their EV ambitions, why would any of the local, unless you're a Chinese manufacturer, they might not have the volumes? Any thoughts on that, Omar or Alexandra or Xander?
I mean, it doesn't require any volume. You just slap some cameras on the car. Most cars already have cameras, so it doesn't really change the bill of the materials all that much. Cameras are pretty cheap. The computer, I think they can make for less than $1,000. You can add it to pretty much any car, but the product development cycle is going to take at least 3 years. So if you want to integrate this into your vehicle, you probably have to start now to get it out in 2026, 2027. And at that point, the hardware and software is going to be, well above human safety, probably driverless approved in multiple places. So it really is sort of a deal to make your car autonomous with just vision, which I think is sort of a value proposition that nobody else can offer. Now, I hear people saying like, what's the update on this? What's the update? This isn't like a talk that, you know, can get done in 2 weeks, really. This is pretty much one of the most major strategic decisions a company could be making right now, whether to try and do their own autonomy or do a deal with Tesla. I mean, your reputation is really on the line to some extent. You're taking a risk. I mean, these people don't have a technical understanding or anything like that. So it's not something that I'm expecting is going to happen all that quickly. But as the results are sort of proven out in the market, as they scale worldwide, as they cross 1 million FSD beta users, and people all over the world are saying, I'm using this, I'm loving it, I don't want to buy a car without it, they're going to start noticing when they ask their customers, hey, why didn't you come back and buy another Lexus this year? And they're going to say, well, I needed FSD. And then you're going to start seeing announcements just like with the supercharger network, where people realized that people didn't want to buy an EV that didn't have great fast charging, and Tesla was the only one that had it. So they had to make a deal with them. They didn't want to. Lucid didn't want to make a deal with Tesla, but they weren't going to be the last guy in the entire industry using CCS. So I think that's what we're going to see here. It's hard to really predict the timeline. This is something that obviously takes years to develop. I don't know when they would want to announce it, whether they would want to start doing testing and make some prototype vehicles and test it out before making an announcement or what. But this is something long term that I think really sort of breaks every analyst's model of Tesla, because they're all looking at vehicle production. They're looking at earnings as a function of how the production can ramp, whether those products have success in the market. And what I really see Tesla have is, as long term, is actually getting a piece of almost every vehicle sold in the world in some form, whether it's through charging, insurance, their vision system, active safety, autonomy, other pieces, software. That's really how I would probably value them in the future is okay, what's the average revenue per vehicle times the number of relevant vehicles? So I think it's something that I'm not even expecting any news necessarily in the next 12 months. It would be a nice surprise if there was, but I think it's really something that as FSD scales worldwide, as FSD 12 comes out, and people just don't want to buy a car without it, you're going to see your Ford type of situation, the one automaker that breaks the ice and says, okay, we're adopting this. And then they pretty quickly follow one after another. No one wants to be the last person with who's, your car still has to be driven manually.
We don't need to have it be on its only, right? This, FSD can be adopted to just as long as it's what throttle by wire and steering by wire.
Yeah. The only output that comes out of FSD is how do I turn the wheel and how should I be accelerating? Should I be pushing the accelerator or the brake, the gas or the brake? And it can run on gas cars and EVs, and it actually should be morally licensed to all. Now, some people would say, how could you license it to a gas car? The economics themselves, due to the lower cost of running an EV, will make almost all autonomous cars electric. It's kind of immoral to not sell a technology that could save someone's life to someone just because they need a gas car for whatever reason or want a gas car. So I would be in favor of just licensing it to all vehicles.
Okay, so let's move on from software. At the same call that Jim Farley had with Elon, this was now May 28th. I looked it up, it's about 6 months ago. Elon said, hey, not only can we partner with superchargers, we can sell you software. He said it twice. Jim Farley came back and said, lithium, you're doing some lithium mining. What about lithium? What's the likelihood that Elon would even allow that? Because doesn't Tesla need as much batteries as they have at this point? Or what's the likelihood that Tesla will, with the lithium mining, which we haven't heard much about where the progress is? Does anybody want to answer that?
The thing I'll say really quick and then is Tesla's entering that because it went nonlinear in terms of its processing costs and its availability, and it turned into at one point a barrier to the master plan. So they're working on an approach for refining that would meaningfully simplify the process. And if they get that going, they're going to change the cost structure of refining, and then they're going to reap the benefits of it themselves. And if they want to scale it, then they can scale it. If they sell it to others, then they can. But I think, Tesla keeps looking at, and, what are these bottlenecks to getting, to achieving the master plan and achieving scale. And this is one of them. That's why they entered it.
If I was a OEM, what I would do is I would tie the two together. Is this getting too ridiculous, guys? But I would say, hey, I would partner with you on software, but you need to give me batteries and lithium, give me that supply kind of assurances. What's the likelihood of that, Jeff?
Zero. They're not going to be in the seat to be like pushing Tesla around. Now, Tesla is going to be in the mode of like they want as many EVs out there as possible. These leaders are not making decisions in the time frame that's beneficial for their companies. If you look, like they basically they basically launched all these EVs without a charging network, and they launched all their EVs over cost, and they're not selling. So they basically like shit their pants. And then Elon comes in and says, all right, well, I'll give you charging access. And, so the point is like, they're not these like master like negotiators, or they're not thinking as far ahead as they probably should be. And they're basically cornered in these situations. So I don't view them being in a situation of like having any kind of leverage in this, but I also don't view Tesla as necessarily trying to kill everybody around them. I think they want to just, I think they want competition. I think they want to just elevate EVs and make sure that's the dominant propulsion system. And right now, these OEMs are kind of working against that based on what they've recently done. So it's going to be interesting. But yeah, it could be multifaceted, but it's not going to be because, some, OEM is trying to get a bundled deal off of Tesla. I think it'll be multifaceted because they're going to be kind of almost forced in that direction. By the way, one more thing is I would get nervous if GM all of a sudden selects Tesla as the FSD solution, just given the track record of what, GM has selected. And if you look at their last 4 or 5 partnerships, they broke off Honda. Cruise is now basically cratering on top of itself. Then you have Nikola and Lordstown Motor. That's the GM board. And that's the GM leadership team getting together and selecting partnerships. So that to me, there would be a little bit of a contrarian indicator if they did that. So I hope that's not the large OEM.
Okay. So I got another question about, all these automakers, right? Mostly are struggling so badly in China specifically that they are making tremendous amount of like a lot of different kinds of relationships with Chinese automakers. And that just boggles the mind that European brands are partnering with China before they will with Tesla. And so you've got just the most recent is Stellantis made an announcement that they're investing $1.6 billion into a very tiny Chinese automaker called Leap Motor. You've heard already that Volkswagen invested in Xiaomi. These are just some. And in some cases, like MG, the Chinese actually bought them out, bought the brand. And others, I think this Leap Motor one, it's crazy. Stellantis is basically saying, I'm going to let you put our badge onto your car, your Chinese made car, and sell it in China, but you put that same badge in that same Chinese made car and I get to sell it anywhere else other than China. So, these guys are making these deals wouldn't at least a small brand, whether it's a Japanese, I think Alexandra, right? You've been pretty hot on thinking that it could be Honda. There was a friend of mine who was DMing me thinking that Honda might be a really good choice because they're not union. And he listed out a bunch of reasons why they might be the actual, a smaller brand that's going to be able to just step up and say, we need to partner with Tesla. But I don't know if you guys can answer that. All these partnerships with China instead of Tesla before they would even, dare to partner with Tesla.
I don't think that's so surprising. I mean, especially the German OEMs have had for at least a decade partnerships in China for constructions of cars and for certain models that were then labeled differently in China and in Europe. So that by itself, the car industry has always had some fluidity. Even remember there were, partnerships at a time where Tesla participated with Mercedes in the smart car, and I think there was some participation also with Toyota in one of their cars. So these crossings between brands and assembly lines, I don't think that is the real news here. The big news would be if it becomes a standard procedure. If one of the big OEMs says, okay, for all our electric cars, we do the car wrap, but we're taking 1, 2, 3 parts of the Tesla universe, being FSD, being infotainment, being the battery train. So I think that's where it will come to. And I do agree completely with Jeff. I think what happened in the last 3 months and why there is so much FUD is they realized between signing, I mean, it's not signed yet, but between hoping to sign with the UAW and their CapEx allocations. And I mean, do remember that especially for the 2 American ones, this was a real good means of getting cheap government loans over the last months and short years, pretending that they are, fully investing into EVs. But I think what they realize now is they don't have the money and the competence to do it. And rather than throwing billions of capital expenditure, they rather focus on what they can do now, have an intermediary stage, which drives me crazy. And I think we should talk about that much more, which is hybrids. I think they're pushing in any possible way hybrids, and we need to find a way of educating the general market of, first of all, how much more expensive hybrids are. Hybrids are in maintenance, that they don't have at all the same acceleration, that they're still using fuel. There's so much education to be done on hybrids so that this transition episode of hybrids gets shorter. But coming back to the OEMs, they can do hybrids with what they have, but they can't be competitive in EVs without a strong partner. And I just do believe that they only have 2 choices, either partnering with Chinese brands, which GM is actually pursuing heavily with that SAI brand, or really moving aggressively together with Tesla.
Okay, so since we have Penny up here, let's talk stock. It's my belief that the short term, we need to have something to prop back the confidence, investor sentiment into Tesla. And one of the biggest ways that happen quite often is as a partnership. A partnership announcement changes the narrative. Any kind of potential partnerships for AI, software, anything like that to come up, superchargers, even something that's people haven't recognized as something new. I still believe that somebody like a McDonald's will step up and say, we're going to do superchargers as well. And that could revive everything. What's your thoughts, Penny?
Yeah, I think that actually it's going to be even bigger than that, especially with the way that Legacy is like backing off of their EVs right now. Hopefully, this point wasn't already brought up, but with them reducing their numbers at some point, like EV revolution is not stopping. So they're going to have to switch production back to EVs eventually. Right now, they need to watch their balance sheets and they need to not bleed money. So they're lowering the numbers, but that's just going to put them further behind Tesla. Tesla's production numbers are going to continue to go up while theirs stall or go down. And I actually think that the future for legacy auto is skinning Teslas. I think that they're going to be like custom shops putting different bodies in the long term on Tesla innards. So I think, like partnership, they're going to be powering the whole industry if you look out far enough from my perspective.
It just reminded me of how the Tesla made fun of the Cybertruck. They put the wrap, making it look like a Ford F-150. What if that's all they did? They took a Tesla and they put the wrap. This now looks like a Volkswagen Golf. This is a Porsche.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what happens there. I think that's a bit longer term. I'm super looking forward to FSD partnerships. I'm sure someone's already brought that up. The supercharging ones are obviously great. It means Tesla's running the backbone for the infrastructure for the foreseeable future, if not forever. Yeah, I mean, I think the next coming years are going to be really big for partnerships for Tesla. And I think probably the first one that we'll see now that for the most part, the charging one is sort of already taken care of is I expect Ford to do a F partnership sometime. Well, it might be announced not that long after V12 if V12 gets launched real smoothly.
So one of the common questions everybody asks, and I think I saw one in the comment here, is would Tesla basically license their factories or even the knowledge? So we know that Elon stepped back and says, "Hey, we don't want to put too much money in in Giga Mexico because of the potential, macro." But if another company says we're going to pay you to create this, help us create a gigafactory because we need to get one going, or even just licensing it, what is the likelihood of that?
0.
I love you, Jeff.
There's nothing to this.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Like, you can't license a factory. It just doesn't make any sense. Like, Tesla is not best served working with a bunch of morons, right? They should make their own products. These guys are idiots. Let's be real. Why exactly do we need to work with them? Sure, something like FSD, you can license that. They can install it on their cars as well. A factory, you can't license a factory. A factory is very geared towards the product that it's making, the building, all of these things, right? Maybe there's some technology you can license there, I don't know, but that's really going to be their core competency and their key differentiator. And even like you talked about licensing the software, it doesn't really make any sense to me. Like the vehicle OS, the vehicle OS is very tuned in with the vehicles. Even like, for example, aspects of the Tesla software that we love, like the over-the-air updates, these work because they control all the components of the vehicle. So it's kind of hard for me to imagine someone licensing the whole Tesla software just because, then you got to fill Tesla in on all your development and they got to spend so much time working with all these companies as opposed to something like FSD where you can just slip the computer in, slip the cameras, control it from whatever software you have. Like that's an even simpler integration than trying to like run the whole car on Tesla. And also Tesla's eating their lunch, right? You said, why are they partnering with these Chinese companies? Well, Volkswagen took an equity investment in Xpeng. Tesla is already like bigger than Volkswagen. They can't take in terms of market cap, they can't take an equity investment, right? And Tesla did the same type of thing when they were young and needed the money. They partnered with Mercedes on an electric smart car. They partnered with Toyota. They did an electric RAV4. And that worked out well for them at the time. Those deals actually saved the company. But, then they got bigger.
If I just may add, I think actually the probability of them having in the end so much space on Dojo that they can same type deals than AWS is higher than them constructing factories for other car makers.
Yeah, agree with that. The factory thing, just like there is a business of doing that. It's called contract manufacturing, and for the contract manufacturer, it's usually really low margin. In that case, this would be Tesla, and Tesla doesn't need to enter 3 or 5% gross margin businesses because that's what it is. So it's usually beneficial. Like this whole, you see some of these relationships with like Foxconn or Quanta or whomever. The OEM is mostly in control. It's not like these contract manufacturers don't do well, but it's usually a single digit gross margin business. So I don't see Tesla entering that. And again, like Omar was saying, the product design and the DFX on the product are tightly intertwined with how the factory is designed. So if you take Tesla's factory design, you overlay it to how others are designing their product, it won't work. It'll be like a round peg in a square hole. And in the OEM and contract manufacturer relationship, the OEM will dictate basically what contract manufacturers are doing today is there are 4 walls and a roof, and the OEM comes in and dictates everything that goes inside of that factory. And that just wouldn't work in this, relationship we're discussing with Tesla. So I think they'll license hardware components. I think that's possible. In fact, they did that in the start of the company. They did that with Daimler. So I think that's more probable on the hardware side than the factory.
What percentage of the components do we think that they could outsource, right? Or not outsource, but rather contract to other people? So is there a scenario where they could make everything but the interior and the body and sell that to the other manufacturers and have them finish the car, so to
Sure.
speak?
Yeah, they could. I mean, that's what we call the car wrappers, where all they do is just, have the seats and the wrap around it, and everything else could come from third party. I mean, it does today, but it's just assembled by a multitude of tier suppliers. While there, it could be that the key components come from Tesla. I mean, the way OEMs operate, and that's why they're always building the cars in 3 years, because it just takes so much time and coordination to bring all these suppliers together and make sure that you have the right one at the best quality for the lowest price. It just doesn't correspond at all to Tesla's thinking. And if they want to adapt to that, there's a lot of new thinking necessary.
Yeah, I think they would be just targeted and strategic. It wouldn't. It would be things like the powertrain, the electric motor, the inverter, and that system. It would be the battery module. It it would be strategic, and it wouldn't be whatever the door handle controls or things like that. It wouldn't be stuff like that. It would be these large strategic modules where they could. That's how I think they would approach it.
All right. Welcome, Ross. Appreciate you joining us. I'm curious what you think is the next partnership that you're expecting or you're going to guess that's going to come to fall in the near term.
Hi, I hope everybody's doing well, and it's been a little bit of time, and miss everybody. And it's a big month for Tesla. I'm very excited. There are supposedly 2 Cybertrucks in LA that have been spotted. We have our team looking everywhere for them. We know Franz is one of them because his kids go to school near mine. But I haven't seen it on the road yet. But I think the Cybertruck is the most impactful vehicle maybe created in the last 50 years, if you don't count the Model S invention. But as far as partnerships are concerned, I think the biggest issue with Tesla is more having a team to create partnerships than necessarily the concept of the partnerships, because they actually have nobody really working on these things when there's so many that they could be doing, including, which I think is the most obvious one, is one with Uber. The relationship between Uber and Tesla is long standing, and they have so many things in common, and there's so many ways for Uber to become the platform for robo-taxis that it just makes so much sense. Not to mention food delivery, AI, knowing what you want, knowing where you go. It just seems like such an obvious win for both companies to work together. So that's the one I'd like to see.
Omar, can you respond to that? Curious what your reaction is.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there probably are a lot of opportunities for partnership. Maybe they just don't care to focus on them. They'd rather engineer their own products. But I mean, you see the $100 million deal from Exxon. I think the EG Group deal could be 100 million plus deal as well. Clearly, there's massive opportunity here in making partnerships to leverage their technology as the world goes electric.
I mean, just charging partnerships alone could be a massive business.
Hey, are you a believer, Ross, then that FSD is going to be imminent?
I use it a lot. And quite frankly, now I feel like it's almost become a normal part of my driving, and I really hate the nag. Like, I'm so sick of the nag because I think it drives better than 75% of the humans in Los Angeles, maybe 90% of the humans in Los Angeles. So, I think it's a risk reward thing, because if they get rid of the nag, I think adoption would increase dramatically. And I think the pricing is well off. I think Elon needs to get off this, extremely expensive price point and get to a very cheap price point just to get mass adoption of the product. Because I think mass adoption would lead to much greater value creation for Tesla than having only, 1 out of 10 users. So full self-driving, I don't see being licensed by anybody else, because you have to build the whole hardware suite to merge with the software suite and then keep everything up to date as quickly as Tesla does things, which no company in the industry can even come close to doing. In fact, now that time has gone on, I'm 100% convinced that no company in the auto industry today or the EV industry today can compete with Tesla in any way in the next decade. I just don't see how that is. So licensing full self-driving, I don't see happening because I don't think anybody can build anything that would work on full self-driving other than Tesla. And that's why I think partnering with Uber would make so much sense. Or let's say a Hertz for robo-taxis because they already have the Teslas. But I think full self-driving capabilities is pretty much ready. And I think they just don't want to have what happened with Cruise happen with full self-driving where, they take the guardrails off and then, it kills a kid and then California bans people from using it, so we don't want that either. So it's a really tough balance between, letting the technology go and safety of the public.
To clarify, Ross, because I think I've heard you say this before, and I might be wrong, but I thought I heard you say that Tesla should partner with Uber and actually start human ride hailing, just to get the network going even before robotaxi. Isn't that what you're thinking?
That's exactly. So if you put, let's say, like a ton of these like Uber drivers and Teslas, and then they start using FSD on their drives, so it's like pre-robotaxi, but you don't tell them that eventually they're going to lose their jobs. You just don't tell them that part. But what you do is you start like putting it in the system, like the Uber integration into the Tesla software, and the full self-driving create like and then you add AI into it, a really powerful platform. And so I see that as something they could do right away.
Anybody want to reply to that? I just can't see it happening. I don't think it's even necessary.
You mean you don't think it's necessary to have a transition with like human drivers first doing drives?
Yep.
And just go straight to robo.
And I don't think you need Uber at all. I think Tesla's has much more data to know exactly what drives people are making. I don't know if they need the software, the app. I don't know enough about Uber to understand what it is that they'll bring to the table.
I wouldn't debate that you're wrong about that because that may be true. But I just think Uber has such a deep knowledge base and database of transportation that goes so long that it would be super complementary to the data that Tesla has.
So I've spent some time in a similar industry to Uber, and a lot of what their company is spinning up the drivers in the various areas, keeping them trained and whatever. And, for the self-driving, I don't know that they need anything even remotely like that. So I think a lot of the expertise is like launching new markets, which is way different with a robo-taxi.
Yeah, but also they would get all the customers and the revenue and the, like if Tesla bought Uber, for example, it's like 1/20th of Tesla, you know what I mean? And so it's like they would get all the drivers, the logistics management systems, they get all the food, all the relationships with all the restaurants, but more importantly, all the data. I mean, when you think about AI getting in your Tesla and knowing everything that you like to eat and where you like to go and all this kind of stuff, well, Tesla's still learning a lot of that. And it's only among Tesla drivers. But with Uber, it's the entire population. And that's why I think it would be complementary, even though I don't disagree that Tesla does have a lot of that own. It would super speed up the process in my mind.
Hi, everybody. The only way I could see like a partnership happening between Uber and Tesla would mainly be for the reason of like regulatory, like just regulations. Like, for example, in New York City, where I am, the license plates for rideshare and taxis are like a stronghold. So I think what you're describing, Ross, is an issue of it's an issue of data, but also new user acquisition. I think realistically, I don't think Uber is going to give that away per se. It'll be a very expensive proposition. And I also think the liability is going to be interesting for Tesla too. So the way that I would kind of see things playing out in terms of quickest path to getting a user base is really like a private network where Tesla obviously owns the roads, they own the insurance, and then, the API can hook into X or something like that along with the payment method. Like that's the only way I could really see something happening.
I want to be clear. I'm not inferring anything's going to happen. The question was, what partnership could I see being beneficial? And that is Uber to me. But I don't think that's actually going to happen.
I've got another question here. So what's the likelihood that this is not necessarily a partnership, it could be a customer-client relationship here, but the government or police departments strike a deal with Tesla for the Cybertruck, massive amounts of Cybertrucks for military use. That could be pretty big if they made that announcement. What's the likelihood of that?
It's not going to happen right away because they can't scale to fill the orders, but I would bet that the military will be a major buyer of Cybertrucks over time.
I think the military would be more interested in the most amount of rockets as cheaply as possible.
And what are we expecting with Starlink on the Cybertruck? Do you know anything on that, Omar?
Well, you can definitely plug a Starlink in. They were using it for the Baja trip.
Yeah, I think you definitely could plug it into the outlet and then stow the Starlink in the under cubby in the bed.
Okay, let's invite some more speakers here. The Kermit.
I would like to ask a question to Ross, please, if you all don't mind. Ross, how do you see the transition via hybrids? Do you think there's going to be, and I'm sorry, I'm pondering this for a while now, so I need to get your reactions all to it. Do you think that there may be now a key phase where hybrid is pushed again? Because I thought hybrid was, gone and people understood we are going straight to EVs.
It's interesting you brought that up because I think the main proponent of that future is Toyota, because they basically missed the entire EV revolution, but they were the creators of the hybrid revolution. And so I think that they very much want hybrids to exist. And I think the gas car companies look at hybrids as, well, if we can get people on these hybrids, we'll still be able to sell some gas, So there's a lot of people pushing for that solution for self-interest. But as far as like logic and technology and the future, hybrids have no place in my mind. They really have no place. Like, I don't see any value in that at all. So anybody building hybrids is like super dumb. Like, you have to go all in on EV. Like, nobody's going to make it if they're not all in on EV. Like, I'm 100% convinced of this now, that Ford and GM are not going to make it. They're done. This union deal was the end of the EV revolution for Ford and GM. And so the future is going to be EVs. It's going to take longer than we'd like, but the only solution that makes sense to me is straight EV. The batteries are so good now, it just doesn't make any sense.
So I kind of disagree with that. There's going to be a transition period, mainly because there are use cases, especially for apartment dwellers, where they just can't have charging, or for whatever reason their HOA or apartment building won't allow charging installed. And then there's also use cases in China.
They're
I know
changing the law. They're going to require that apartment buildings have charging.
Yeah, in California, but in New York, it's just not. It's going to take a while. Only
You don't
'cause
need a car in New York at all if you want to
that's
make charging.
totally and completely false. And on top of that, like outside of the US, I know for a fact, like in China, yes, there's a lot of CCS2 DC fast chargers, but there are definitely heavy use cases for drivers where, hybrid still is necessary. So I think like,
Well, why not just say a gas car then?
well, that's
Let's
the
be
thing, right?
real. Hybrids
you
suck.
just-
Nobody's excited they got a hybrid.
100%.
Nobody goes,
100%.
wow, look at my hybrid. I was recently looking at Toyota sales figures. You know what percentage of Toyota sales is hybrid? So many years after they started selling the Prius, 30% of their sales are hybrid. 70% are pure ICE. So you ask yourself, why are 70% of their customers choosing pure ICE? And you realize it's actually the worst of both worlds. So it's more expensive than a pure gas car up front. You do get some fuel savings, better efficiency, but it's more expensive. It's heavier. They don't put the battery pack in the floor like Tesla. So it's got worse handling. You still have this battery. It can help improve your range while it's got some juice. But then when it's out of juice and it's not that big of a battery, you're just carrying around this big hunk of metal that's then actually making your efficiency worse. And most people don't ever plug it in, even if it's an option or learn how to, because they just keep putting in gas. At the end of the day, it's just another gas car with a small battery. So that's why BEV sales today are actually greater than hybrid sales worldwide. They passed several years ago. And I don't think this is a trend that's going to reverse. Hybrids are just a desperate.
Well, also, like, gas will get cheaper because the demand will continue to go down while supply will continue to increase. And there'll be cheap gas cars out there for a long time. It's going to be a long time before gas cars are gone, But the hybrid, exactly for all the reasons you're saying, Omar, just doesn't make any sense.
I mean, yes, it doesn't make sense. I'm just saying there still is a limited use case for them, at least for this strange transition period. And you know what, like Ford and GM going down, I don't know if the government's going to allow that.
Like, the government's going to bail out Ford and GM for the Second time.
Probs. Arun Motors.
Okay. Let's invite the Kermit.
I don't think
who's
so.
been waiting for a while. Go ahead, Kermit.
I don't think so either.
Kermit, are you there?
I think everyone has a limit to how many times they can get bailed out. Like the first time you go bankrupt, people kind of feel sorry for you. Then like the second, third, fourth time, people are kind of like, all right, maybe just let them die.
I do think that there's going to be a barrage of trying to control the narrative, and they're going to hit hard on EVs are not good, they're not ready yet. And I do think just marketing wise, they'll promote the hybrid because it still has that EV story on it. And it really is just marketing. And we're going to hear more and more of this in the next year. I think we need to be even more than what we've been seeing for the last several years.
That, and they'll also have to, because they, regulatory requirements, they need those EPA, fleet requirements fulfilled.
Alexander, do you still believe that you said that there was that Nissan van that is actually marketed as full robotaxi, and you thought that maybe they would partner with Tesla?
Yeah, so what they did is about 3 weeks ago. I'm always bad with timing. The Japanese annual car show, and Nissan had one of those conception cars up there, for which they claimed that it will be at release, which was scheduled within 24 months, fully autonomous, and that they would have another press release coming to that matter where they would specify with whom they partner in a very short lapse of time. So nothing has come out since.
That means they have no clue who they're partnering with yet. And they're going to
Well-
find out and then issue the press release later.
Maybe. I mean, it could be, because you saw not similar, but lots of crap as well around the Munich auto show. And I think the Chinese is currently just happening. It's all this blustering, no doubt about it. But Nissan's was really more precise than anybody else, really saying, we're ready for autonomous. We have a partner. We're announcing it shortly.
Sorry, they
Sure
said we
they
have a
are.
partner? Alexander, they said we have a partner?
Well, they said they're ready, and they will bring a press release how they're going to do it. I mean, they didn't say a partner, but I mean, nobody had ever heard of them having any tool. So it's not as if they had developed it. I mean, just ask Omar. It doesn't just fall from the sky overnight, does it?
Many companies have shown off concept autonomous vehicles. You don't actually need to solve autonomy to put one of those cars in the auto show and have people look at it. So putting out a concept, easy. Actually making it work in the real world, hard.
Channeling some Elon there, but also, Nissan's kind of a dumpster fire right now. They're reorganizing.
And that's precisely what I think, right? It's going to be a smaller brand that is desperate and wants to. Imagine the very first one that comes up and says, we're going to be Tesla built inside. We're going to have their tech. It's going to revive their brand. It's going to keep them alive. And they're going to shoot up right to the top immediately in everybody's minds. And they'll just rebrand themselves. I think this is critical, the very first one to make that announcement.
I think it's going to be important for Tesla to get, it's not saying that they can't start working with partners now, but it's really going to be important from a priority perspective for them to get their solution out of beta in their home country, get the nag off, and, get V12 out, or, get this end-to-end solution out, and then quickly expand geographically, because that has to be, I'm sure that's Tesla's priority as well, is to expand geographically. Now, if somebody wants to come in and partner with them sooner, I think they'll prioritize that appropriately. But I think those are the priorities that Tesla's thinking.
Cybertruck delivery invites just went out.
Did you get one, Omar?
Yeah, I actually did.
Congratulations, Omar.
So you weren't that banned as at one point you thought you were.
Well, I mean, I claimed the referral reward, so
Omar's only banned.
I don't think they really had a choice.
Only banned from events that are important for the company's information, but when it comes to promotion, he's allowed.
I think they just didn't want me shouting things out.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But I'll be straightforward with everybody.
Oh wait, what? Holy shit! It's on November 7th.
I know. Now that time has gone on.
Oh no, we have to RSVP by November 27th. Sorry.
Now that time has gone on, I'm 100% sure that most, if not all, the car companies in the world are so far behind Tesla in so many ways that Elon goes out of his way to slow Tesla down just because they're so far ahead. They would just destroy them all. Nobody's even close on software. Nobody's close on hardware, performance, ecosystem in any way. It's a dominance that I've said for like Apple. And it's a dominance that is even better than Apple because Apple's competitors are way better. And, truthfully, Tesla's competitors are just horrendously bad companies. Look at Ford stock. It trades at 5 PE. And these are tough days for Tesla. We're trading at 60 PE, and like we should be 100. And so it's like, I think the big thing is which company is smart enough to adopt as much Tesla technology, hardware, software, charging standards, whatever. That's the only thing I would be doing if I was Honda or if I was, any other company that makes cars. But in China, they get it. There's no question in my mind the Chinese car makers get it. And China wants to be in cars what Japan used to be in cars. And they want to be the Japan car maker of the future. And I think China has a great shot at doing that.
Ross, if I can ask
Which
you,
brand do
have
you
you
think? Which Chinese
Ro-
brand do you think is the closest?
Well, obviously, like Neo is really close on like the vibe of Tesla and the ecosystem. I don't know if they're building stuff as good as our stuff. So I can't vouch because I've never like used Neo products or like been to China, even test it. But I know that they have good stuff. And my Chinese sources say it's really good. And then, BYD is obviously just a dominant company in so many ways. And they're cool vehicles. Honestly, if they weren't Chinese vehicles and they just had some European brands stuck on them, people would buy them. No question.
Hey, Ross, can I ask you, with respect, have you divested from your other non-Tesla investments? Like I think you had Rivian and Lucid in the past, a year
Oh, no,
possibly?
not Lucid. We've had Rivian, Polestar, BYD. So I still like all, and also Arcimoto, unfortunately. I still like all these companies. It's not that I've changed sort of like I actually love Rivian, like Rivian, like everybody is buying Rivians right now. And so I think what it is that if you create an environment that's really bad to sell cars, it doesn't, especially EVs, it doesn't really matter if Biden's going to give people a discount if you're in a business that's incredibly interest rate sensitive. And it's hurt me a lot because we have solar investments have just been decimated. Look at what rallied today. It was solar. And it's like, why is solar rallying today? Because of inflation numbers. Well, it's more because of rates and the fact that solar systems cost money and you borrow money and solar sales are down substantially because of the policies that are in place today. So EV makers and solar, and this has been a very tough sector. So on one sense, there's a huge opportunity for long-term investors, but I've had to, move on because in my business, that's what I have to do in the short term. And you have to wait until the environment is better for those companies. And that'll happen at some point, probably next year, when the Fed realizes that they're fucking idiots and they're destroying businesses, especially small, innovative businesses. And so once that policy changes to we're going to help small, innovative businesses, it'll be an awesome time to get right back into all these sectors and stocks.
Hey, Warren, welcome. How's Japan doing? And we're talking about partnerships. Is there anything that you could guess or expect that might be the next partnership to fall?
I don't have anything like that in mind. I did want to echo what Ross was saying on a couple of things. I think Rivian is the one US EV startup or a non-Chinese US EV startup that really looks like they're going to make it. They're still questionable, but I think they're really making progress. I think RJ Scaringe had a much better picture of the market than Peter Rawlinson or Frohnmeyer at Arcimoto had of what the potential in the market was. And then the point about the other automakers, I'm in Nagoya, Japan, which is the home of Toyota, and I meet a lot of people who are working in the Toyota network, whether for Toyota or Toyota related companies. And they know, not everybody, but a lot of people that I talk to know that Tesla is a juggernaut. And the question is, how does Toyota survive? Not, how does Toyota defeat Tesla? It's just, how does the Japanese car industry survive this tidal wave? And there's articles in I've posted a few of them. There's articles from Japanese. One of my friends at Toyota sends me articles that he finds, and he's convinced, he's up for retirement in a few years, and he's like, I'm out, and he's looking for what's next because he sees it like, then I think a lot of people think Toyota has one of the best chances, and There's tremendous engineering talent. There's a tremendous supply chain here, but there's so many things that tie down the legacy automakers. And for Toyota, it's like they have they have, first of all, these employees, and the societal expectation is they'll take care of their employees. Well, if you make cars more efficiently and you have to reduce your volume because there's this big competitor, how do you maintain your employee base? And if you make cars more efficiently and you bring a lot of production in-house, how do you maintain your network of, you have the societal obligation to take care of your network of suppliers. And there's just, the people who understand the tidal wave that's coming, not just from Tesla, but I think BYD is probably, it's hard to know with Chinese companies, but I think BYD might be the strongest Chinese EV company. But I think there's multiple Chinese EV companies that are making progress. Like, how do existing automakers survive when their market share is being eaten away? I don't agree that Elon's slowing down to let it. I think he's trying to help the other companies along. I don't think he's slowing Tesla down at all.
Okay, welcome, Sat. Did you want to join the conversation? Any reaction to what you just heard, or maybe partnerships?
Yeah, a couple things. I think Rivian is hopefully making better progress. It's just that I think I was doing posts before. It's just, I've been into Rivian before. They have too many things. It's kind of like when Tesla went up, did the Model X, they put everything into it. And I feel like that's what these OEM EV startups are trying to do, put everything in it. And it's like, no, you need to make a unit that's sufficient enough, that's compelling in one or two aspects, not everything. Their interior design is insane. And I think if you have 5 parts for your backside, like, I remember there's a wooden piece, there's a metal piece, there's a plastic piece. Tesla had 1. It's like 1 piece, right? That simplicity, it says everything about the manufacturing efficiency. If you have 5, 6 suppliers for the back of the seat and you really don't need that, that doesn't add any value. I think that's where the cost goes overrun because it's overkill. And they have a great product. They just need to focus on certain parts and make it more efficient because Tesla has never lost billions and billions. Like, Rivian is losing basically the entire market cap of Tesla back in 2013 and 14. That's not even the cash pile we're talking about, just the loss that they're having. So the insanity of this, like, financials of today, is like so inflated because they're able to tap the capital markets and get billions of dollars. So they're not actually being cost effective from the very beginning. They should have never lost 6 billion last year. That's an insane amount of numbers for the small amount that they made. And Tesla was able to do that in a financial crisis. Like, they were in a financial crisis, they're able to make that cost work, and they couldn't tap into the capital markets as easily or as abundantly as they have. So I think the fundamental thinking has to change into the design and how it affects their manufacturing. The other part about what Warren mentioned about Toyota, in Japan, there's a relationship with a subsidiary where oftentimes they have stock ownership in the subsidiary, so it becomes like a part of the company. So that relationship is very hard to like break, and that's why I think they'll probably survive, but at a much smaller scale because the leadership has to be so strong to be able to rip that relationship apart, and nobody is able to do that. That's why I think it's really difficult climate for the OEMs in Japan right now because they see it, but the relationship can't change, and someone has to come in to basically say, "Hey, we don't need all these suppliers. We need something completely different." And that's usually not a person from inside the company.
Okay, different topic. Omar, somebody was telling me that there's a chance, very small probably, that at the Cybertruck event, that they might then announce FSD version 12 being released to some employees or whatever it is. He did say 2 weeks, and that most people took that as a joke. But 2 weeks from the day he said that, basically lined up with the Cybertruck event. Any guesses of how you read that?
Well, I wouldn't read too much into it. I mean, you know, he says a lot of things. I think it'll be ready when it's ready and we'll use it and we'll know if it's any good or not. So, I'm not going to get my hopes up. I'm hoping to be surprised, but not expecting much. I think the focus of the Cybertruck event is just going to be on the Cybertruck and maybe they'd give rides with FSD 12 or something like that. Maybe that's what he meant. But I think their internal goal has been to release it by the end of the year. And I'm expecting it to probably slip into Q1 or even Q2, just based on how these things go. If it's not ready, you just can't release it. So, again, I'd love to be surprised and it's actually ready in 2 weeks. But how many times have we seen Elon say that something's coming in 2 weeks? And what percentage of that time did it actually show up in 2 weeks?
Okay. And then another question here is Grok being released by XAI. Is that any way the first example of a dojo as a service? Or I do understand that Grok themselves, I think Jeff pointed this out, they are the second largest purchaser of NVIDIA chips. So maybe they didn't need to do that. But is dojo service could possibly start already, with first of all, within the, family of Elon Musk companies using it first.
Well, XAI could potentially be one of the first customers of a Dojo cloud product, but they didn't train Grok on Dojo. They trained it on NVIDIA chips. So the memory bandwidth on the chips is just much higher. You get much better performance. The Dojo version 1 chip just isn't really good for that. The team has said with the Dojo version 2 chip, it should be significantly better and able to match the performance on use cases like training LLMs, but that's not into production yet. They're still on the Dojo version 1. So maybe after the Dojo version 2 is out, it's something XAI could look at, but my understanding is they haven't used Dojo so far.
Go
Just
ahead,
wanted
Warren.
to ask if Omar has any idea of this. I think Elon said that they trained Grok on an 8,000 H100 GPU cluster. How the hell did XAI get 8,000 H100 GPUs so fast?
I mean, it's not that difficult. When Elon Musk calls and he says he wants 8,000 H100s, you as NVIDIA probably find them and give them to him.
That's correct.
Yeah, wasn't it you, Jeff, that said that XAI is the second largest purchaser of NVIDIA chips?
They'll probably be the first largest soon.
Well, larger than Tesla? What?
Well, I don't know. Like he might be building XAI to serve everybody,
I mean, isn't it like well established that it's really hard to get NVIDIA chips right now? And somehow Elon just makes a phone call. Maybe there's more than a phone call. And somehow he gets like this huge allotment of chips when everybody else is struggling to get chips.
Well,
And this is like the latest chip.
Jeff, why don't you pipe in, man? Because yeah, there he is. Jeff is going to pipe in. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if they're second, but I mean, they've been working on Dojo for a while. So, Tesla has a pretty good foresight in their supply chain. So, I'm assuming they put their orders in. Could Elon, sway and this H100 and A100, they're on something called global allocation. So basically everybody wants it and there's not enough. And and so when you're doing allocation, there are many things that come into play, like what's the time, what are the payment terms, so anyway, could Elon have swayed it? Sure. I mean, we're all just speculating there, but I'm more on the line that they put their orders in because they had foresight of what they're building with Dojo, and they got, they ordered a lot of it and they got their parts. So, and he said still can't get enough of them at this point, and they're in production right now on they're fabbing out their own solution. So I'll be interested to see how that starts getting feathered in.
Another sort of interesting aspect to it is Dojo's on the 7 nanometer process node versus the H100 being on the 4 nanometer process node. So it's sort of an older TSMC technology, which, means less performance, but it also means that it's much easier to get compared to, the 4 nanometer or the 3 nanometer that Apple has exclusive access to right now. So this should help them. If they can do a lot of their training for autopilot on Dojo, it's going to be, a startup that wants to compete with them is going to have to compete for a very tight H100 supply. Whereas Tesla's buying, 10,000 plus H100s. They got their A100 cluster, 14,000 chips. And then they've also got Dojo building up to 100 exaflops in the next 18 months. So they're in a pretty good situation having designed their own chips. And TSMC, I think, should be able to supply them pretty well without being caught up in a lot of the constraints that are facing some of the newer chips.
Hey, I got to run, but I want to thank everybody for having me and inviting me on. And I'm very excited about AI. And if I were Jensen at NVIDIA and Elon called me wanting to build AI products, I would definitely give him all the chips he wanted, because think of the potential of that and how much that helps NVIDIA. So it's a great time for technology, and I'm really bullish on all of these developments. It's a really exciting time. So anyways, have a good evening.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ross. So let's talk robots and Tesla bots. I mean, it's too early at this point, and more likely Tesla will do it internally. And secondarily, after they use it internally, they might use it for their suppliers. Any thoughts of potential that somebody would make an announcement that they would already, pre-order kind of like just like the chips, right? We're talking about the chips. You want to be wise and ahead of time and saying when it comes out in 3 years from now, 4 years from now, we want to have the first orders.
Go ahead.
No, sorry. Oh, sorry, Warren. I was just going to say, not yet, but at some point along the journey, yeah, it's going to be more about, what kind of capability they're demonstrating. They want to see it running, in Tesla factories. And, at some point, Tesla could be on an earnings call reporting on, percent of line labor that, is human versus humanoid. And then it becomes really real. Then it's almost too late. But yeah, I mean, I think somewhere along the journey, but probably not yet.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think if you look back at Semi, there was a moment in the Semi where they announced that they had ordered, they announced the Semi and then they started announcing orders like Pepsi had, made a bunch of orders. And I think some other large companies had ordered Semi. So I think, at some point, there's no pricing yet. There's no sense of, there's like minimal sense of specs on the bot. I don't know that Tesla has figured out yet what they're selling bot for. But I think, when they get closer to making a more substantive announcement about bot, it may be that when they make the announcement, okay, here's our latest bot event, here's what it can do, and you can pre-order your bot now, and we've announced we've got this many orders from this many companies. I'm not 100% certain. I think there's a lot of people who think that bot's primary use case is going to be in factories and in corporate America. I still hold out hope that there will be something like a bot beta program where Elon will let us order bots. And, those of us who are dumb enough to pay $50,000 for a bot to have it around with us and, train it on our own, like, I, I don't know why they wouldn't make that available to us other than, I mean, there's probably good reasons for it.
Go ahead, Sap.
Yeah, the one thing about the bot is that there are very simple robots in Japan already functioning. Like one store has literally, it's just a replacement of a server. They place the food on the tray of that robot and it takes it to the table. And there was one scene in the mall. I think it was a patrol thing. It got confused because it doesn't have like Tesla vision or that kind of vision processing. So it can't do real life processing. It just sees sensors like a wall. So it basically was blocking the elevator where there's a woman with a baby, right? So yeah, I see the potential of what Tesla is doing at Dojo and that Tesla vision they even have in FSD, that it's really helpful and necessary to have it in real life. So very low level like robotics, it's already in our daily lives and they're trying to use it. So I think when the Optimus comes around and it has higher functionality than that, I think is really feasible to use in our daily lives in a much more functional way. And I think a beta program or whatever else that's going to be there to try it out is going to be significantly more useful.
And isn't it likely that Optimus is going to have Grok built in so that it can, understand what people are asking it and respond when somebody asks it a question? It seems like probably the cars will have Grok also. Like any bot should have something like Grok in it. Does that make sense, Omar?
Of course, yeah. Language would be probably the primary interface besides vision.
That was the issue with the robot that got stuck. Like they had to like call the number on it. They couldn't talk to the robot or tell it to move. So that functionality would be like vital when you run into problems.
Do you guys have thoughts on how would the different Musk companies write partnerships with each other? So obviously you want the bot, you want the Tesla cars to take advantage of the natural language capabilities of XAI. Don't they have to establish something in relation because of shareholders, needs and so forth? Jeff, would they not announce that also, or they would not? They would just be in the background.
I mean, they could. Sorry, you were asking me, Herbert?
Yes, but you obviously I'd love to hear Omar answer too. So.
Yeah, sorry, you go first, Jeff.
I was just going to say it's possible.
I
ahead,
could
Omar.
see it happening if they do subsidiaries, kind of like Tesla construction right now. I mean, maybe when Tesla gets mature enough, probably transfer pricing and all that good stuff will be involved too.
Yeah, and I would imagine them kind of collaborating on things like chip design informally. And then if XAI were, for example, to become a customer of Tesla, Training Cloud or whatever, Dojo, H100s, whatever, then they would obviously compensate them at whatever the market rate is or whatever Tesla decided is an acceptable rate for Dojo. And, they would just make a cash payment there. And, I imagine I would probably allow Tesla to license the model possibly for free or, for some nominal amount.
There's a long history of Elon's companies collaborating and, SpaceX's material science guys working on the material science of the aluminum for gigacastings or the stainless steel for Cybertruck. And it's my understanding there's some sort of like understanding between the companies that if you're working at one company and you see a project another company you want to work on, you can, go pop over there for a while and work at the other company anywhere within Elon's network. And there's somebody raised the term transfer pricing, which is really within a company, you've got operations in country A and country B, and how do you allocate your accounting of revenue and costs between the different countries to manage the tax consequences of what you're doing. It's not really transfer pricing when it's between companies,
No,
but you have
well
to.
understood. I just meant like when we get to that point where, well, I don't know if we'll ever get to that point, but they'll buy or execute at with whatever company in Musk Industries is more favorable.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to criticize for it. I think there's a lot of people in the audience who might not have heard the term
Totally fair.
transfer pricing before.
Totally fair.
It
Transfer.
was Joe Justice. He said that's how it works. He worked there at Tesla, and he said that if you're an employee of Tesla and you decide one day I want to work at SpaceX, apparently you can make that decition. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think the badge is like you have a Tesla badge and you walk into a SpaceX job site and come on in.
No,
And
not quite, not quite. The SpaceX is
No?
pretty tight in terms of security.
Okay. But then, you look at Boring Company, and the CEO of Boring Company was a SpaceX employee. That's Steve Davis, who's featured in the book Liftoff. There's a lot of synergies between the companies, and they find ways to work together to make things better. And it's pretty rare to see companies work that well together. And you can sort of see the synergies coming together more and more. I don't think Ryan Tanaka's here. Ryan Tanaka is the Neuralink YouTuber, and he thinks that Neuralink will eventually create an artificial brain that might be dropped into Optimus. That you can sort of reverse engineer the human brain based on what Neuralink is doing, and then come up with a brain that would actually be useful. And I'm not sure he's correct. I'm not sure.
That's ridiculous.
Well, I should probably let him speak for himself.
Yeah,
I think
that-
he thinks. Go ahead.
I was going to say that kind of goes against the company's mission of it's more of like a symbiotic thing than a replacement use case.
Well, I'm not saying it's a replacement. It's like, how do you engineer, is there a higher level of brain function that might be attainable if you learn from the human brain what Neuralink is going to learn from the human brain? I don't know the answer to that. I think we're limited in right now. We have large language models, we have diffusion models, we have some other models of how AI works. Is that going to get us all the way to artificial general intelligence, or is there something more we can learn from the human brain that we haven't figured out yet that will help make AI better?
And actually, going back to your point of like an Optimus beta program, I think the thing that I've noticed with Tesla over the past decade is as the company matures, more and more internal testing goes on. So I think Tesla has enough companies within itself to test Optimus, whether it be the lithium refinery, eventually the mining, but the factories. I mean, heck, even like the facilities at the offices and the factories, you could test out the actuators and do all that kind of stuff. So I think they'll probably release it like similar to FSD. They'll release it to the public when they feel like there's enough of a degree of satisfaction and safety when ready.
Omar, what do you think? Can we get a bot beta program, or am I just dreaming?
I don't know. I mean, I guess you'd have to buy one. It's probably going to be pretty expensive. So
Is 50K too much or too low?
I mean, he just literally just said a few days ago, didn't he, that it might be just a little bit lower than the cost of a car.
Yeah, but which car?
yeah, so I'm probably talking like 20,000.
Yeah, I think the bot and the $25,000 vehicle are converging in cost structure, and they're going to be the two like high volume robots that are going to be out there. One, on wheels, obviously doing the driving piece, and the other one is going to be. I think that they're converging on cost structure. Very interesting, by the way, how that's happening, because in that year, like 2025 or 6, like if you just look at the amount of like metal or the amount of like mass that Tesla supply chain brings in and then moves out, man, it's going to be on a whole new level when that $25,000 vehicle is in production. It'll take a couple of years to ramp, but then same for the bot. In a couple of years, it's going to be amazing. And I think that cost structure that price point is critical in the whole thing.
I just think Tesla eats. You have a $25,000 car or a Cybertruck with an Optimus sitting in it. And somebody raised the question of whether Optimus could actually sit in the car. That's a whole separate conversation. But driving around delivering meals, and like you've eliminated the cost of the human driver, and you've dramatically reduced the cost of the vehicle operation. And it's there's no pressure on the car to drive like fast, and it can drive reasonably. What like doesn't that like destroy Uber Eats and DoorDash and like deliver better? The bot hops out of the car, delivers the product to the door, and walks back to the car, and there's no tipping.
Yeah, by the way, there's a couple comments now referring to bot animals and mobile bots. Tesla may not just be doing a humanoid bot only. There was a Tesla AI team member who actually said the word bot animals and other bot animals. And in one of the job descriptions that Alexandra was sharing that Tesla had for hiring people for Tesla bot, they referred to mobile bots and did not refer to Tesla bots in one of those job applications. So there might be different kinds of form factors that they're working on.
I love it. That's just crazy shit.
Yep, my R2D2 to the C3PO.
I mean, I could definitely see that happening, especially with the trend of like, assisted living and all that kind of stuff where, you want a companion and maybe it's like in the shape of a dog, like the Sony Aibo back in the day. That would be very interesting to see.
Why does the bot have to be so expensive at, like saying numbers like 20,000? If they scale it, how much are actors and, all of this? It seems like, are you guys talking about just initial launch pricing or later on?
Right. 20,000 is not even that expensive, especially if you finance it. Think about it. A bot, you won't need a housekeeper, you won't need a landscaper. Like all these services can be that you can replace.
Well, manufacturing costs should be significantly lower because you're talking about 125 kilograms of mass versus, sorry, 125 pounds of mass versus, 3,400 pounds of mass for a Model 3, 3,500 pounds. And then, I think Elon said the car has more, you know, parts, more actuators, whatever than the bot. So when you're manufacturing a million of them or 10 million of them a year, then yeah, the manufacturing cost should be done. But then the sale price would be, well, what's the value delivered to the customer and how much are people willing to pay for it? And if you've got a bot that's replacing a $20 an hour worker or eliminating the need for a $20 an hour worker, on 2 shifts, you're generating, something like $80,000 a year in value for 10 years. It's got $800,000 of value to the buyer. So you're not going to sell it for just a 5% or 25% margin. You're going to sell it for whatever the market will bear. So I think that once it's like that's why the beta program maybe you'd sell it for 50 grand, but once it's actually useful in a large number of use cases, you're going to sell it for 100 grand or more, and you're going to have 90% plus margins. Unless
Wouldn't
I'm
you, yeah, wouldn't you just separate out the uses into software and do that as a, recurring revenue kind of thing?
Well, but even the base model, the basic model is gonna be I think it's not crazy to say that the basic model of bot is gonna be able to replace a $20 an hour $15. Well, it depends on what your minimum wage is. In California, you're probably like $25 an hour now, but say you're able to replace a $20 an hour worker. Well, if it's able to do that, what's the demand for that? The demand for that is, effectively infinite. Right? Because I'm here in Japan, and I think SAT has seen these signs on the doors of restaurants. There's all these signs saying they're looking for part-time workers. They're just, like they're strapped for workers in a lot of places. I think this is true in America as well. It's hard to find people, that are willing to do the work. And if all of a sudden you've got a bot that doesn't get in a fight with its girlfriend and stay home for 3 days, and call in sick, like all of a sudden, like the demand is just off the charts. And if it's like I said, if it's delivering $80,000 in value a year to its owner, why, then you're gonna have people lining up to pay $100,000 for a bot. Why would they sell a version for less?
Okay, let's bring back the conversation back to partnerships. Another idea that people have been throwing around is the app store, right? We started seeing the Tesla car have a kind of the beginnings of an app store. Now that there's 5 million cars out there, and if you add the Grok capability into the cars, could there be different kinds of partnerships announced associated with apps in the car? Omar, do you have any thinking on this?
Yeah, so I think on the bot, what we're actually going to see is a line of robots from them. So the cheapest one's just going to be a dog. So the dog obviously has less capabilities than the human. It's a simpler robot. Maybe that's half the price or something like that. And then maybe you could have a humanoid one, hopefully an entry level model starting around, $25,000. That could be something that maybe you have around the house. It can pick up your laundry, pick up your dishes, put them in the dishwasher, that kind of dexterity. And then, Elon said we're having them try and thread a needle using vision. So I think it could actually make sense to have like a super high end model that could, for example, handle heavy loads, really like commercial grade, you know, worker type stuff, construction, all those kinds of use cases. Maybe get it up to like 100,000. Because the way I would actually imagine this being consumed is that you can just go in the Tesla app and say, okay, $10 an hour per bot, send me 3 bots. And they throw a couple bots in the Cybertruck and they just come to you and you go, hey, can you mount my TV on the wall? And they've got the program installed. They can look at your room with vision, mount the TV up, and just get back in the truck and handle another job. So it would probably make sense to actually invest a little more in making the robot quite robust and people could access it on an hourly basis, right? If it's making $10, $20 an hour and it costs $20,000, then it only needs to work for 1,000 hours to pay for itself. And 1,000 hours is, only like 42 days or something like that. So within a month or so, it would pay for itself. So I think the value, if it can really replace a lot of human jobs, is potentially enormous.
And Herbert, to get to your question of software and app store, I think in Tesla China, they started to do partnerships with, or they did it in the past with like PUBG, where they started putting in the cars and the games and stuff. I think there's plenty of potential there. It's just a question of, I think the priority for Tesla is obviously FSD right now. I think we'll get there once they need to start offering, other value propositions. And the reason why I bring this up is like, if you go to China and you look at the competing electric vehicles, a lot of the value proposition that kind of differentiates like the Roe and like the Neos and all that is like the in-car, in-app entertainment. It is better than what Tesla has in China, at least right now.
Yeah. Alexandra just published when you want to tell us about that, the wonderful write-up of talking about the new luxury features is no longer the leather wheels you need to have in-car entertainment, in-car software. That's now the luxury premium brand out there.
That's true. And they did quite a lot of market studies. I published all the links on my X feed and you can download them. But especially in China, it's software overall. The Chinese buyer, 99% of EV buyers in China expect a good level of technology, a smart car when they purchase an EV. And that is still around 65, 70 mark in Europe. The expectations of technology in an EV are just so much higher than the typical ICE buyer. And it increases every year. So it really is about smart cars. Smartness is the new luxury, much less than mahogany, wooden panels, or whatever else. And it's astonishing that this is now actually transgressing age groups, while it was initially obviously the under 30 that were more interested by tech. In only 2 years, it has caught up to the boomer generation everywhere as well.
Totally agree with that. And I think to the point about, let's call it traditional luxury with materials and how much dead animal and trees you have in the car. What's fascinating, and I'm fresh off China, so I like all the cars we talk about, the Neo, the Zeekr, the Li Xiang, all that stuff. Like, I've been in them. I was there. I was in Highland, all that stuff. What's interesting is like, for example, we take BYD. They're typically known to make like these econo boxes that are not sexy, super ugly, and all that kind of stuff. And then on my recent trip, what I noticed is they're throwing in not just the tech, they're throwing in the traditional luxury. So by doing that, they're trying to transform their brand from and saying, not only are we a tech company, our quality is really good too. Right. But then like you have like the Li Auto, the L9, for example. Yes, it's a hybrid, but the thing has like a friggin' 34-inch screen in the back and a passenger screen to watch entertainment and a full app store. It's certainly, depending on the brand, if you're a startup, it's easier because you could start from the ground with tech. But if you're like a BYD, you have to fight other things as well.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Go ahead, Sat. Go ahead, Sat. Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, I went to the Japan Mobility Show and I actually sat in the BYD seal, and the interior was great. The fit and finish looked great, but they have a bunch of buttons. Like it's like a regular gas car has all those buttons, and then they have the screen just like a Model S screen that rotates. So I don't see the purpose. The reason why Tesla put big screen there is so that you don't have to have all these buttons. So you basically have all the suppliers just like a regular gas card did, and then you stick this monitor that rotates, which I don't understand why you need to rotate it, but it doesn't replace the functionality of the buttons. So I don't see how they can make that vehicle more efficiently when you have all these other buttons and unnecessary things when you have the actual digital screen. So they're making a lot of great progress. I've invested in them 10 years ago. I divested away from them, partly because they're making hybrids and so forth. But the interior doesn't make me feel like, oh, they're going to be better than Tesla. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make you feel that way, but the thing about the Chinese automakers, they understand that A, the market is big enough, and B, it's segmented enough. Like, there's more than enough room for Tesla and all the other guys in China. And like to that point, what I found fascinating there is the newer EV manufacturers. Hey, let me level set here and say the only reason why they're making it is because they're subsidized heavily in terms of their contract manufacturing, or they have other businesses that support other automakers that offset their losses in the EVs. But what's fascinating is they're going for segments and designs that Tesla has yet to touch. So, for example, the Roe has a electric minivan with 250 miles of range, which is, you know, like minivans aren't sexy in particular, but if you're picking up the family from the airport and you want an electric one, it's amazing. So like they're going after these segments that Tesla has not touched yet. So I think that was pretty smart.
Okay. Wonderful conversation, guys. That was fantastic. We covered a lot of ground with the partnerships. Really thankful for Omar, Warren, Ross, Tesla, Ted, Alexandra, Jeff. Please follow everybody, Xander and Sat. Follow folks. And then we also have the Cyber Bulls 1 logo there. Please click on that and follow. And we're going to do this space every Tuesday. And then we also have our regular Cyber Bulls videos on YouTube. Thank you so much, Omar, Warren, and everyone else who joined. Appreciate you guys.
Bye.
Today's call, I mean, every time